to, if you have space, then we'll share it later.
And it says it is recording.
It is recording now.
Okay. Okay, so we're online. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is the third virtual workshop of PAC Boulder. We organize this series of monthly tutorials or workshops. This month, it's in collaboration with the graduate school. Leslie is going to give a terrific workshop. If you want to see more topics or different topics, please get in touch with us. Our website is colorado.edu/PAC, PAC. You can contact us and you can suggest a new topic for workshops. We're very happy to have you all, and I'll turn it to you, Leslie.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I have to say, Zoom is super awkward. I feel like a crazy person, like I'm always talking to myself. So just throwing that out there. If any of you guys need to chat or have a question or a comment, feel free to unmute yourselves and just chime right in, or you can also post it in the chat forum. So anyway, my name's Leslie Ellen Blood, and my PhD is in curriculum and instruction. And I got my PhD in 2007 from the University of Kansas. My research is on habits, happiness, and productivity. And the talk that I'm going to give for you guys today, and the slides that I'm going to show you, is trying to basically condense 5 years of content into 1 hour. So one of the things I wanted to mention is if you like what you're hearing and you want more in-depth information on habits and 4-hour productivity blocks and things of that nature, please feel free to reach out. I have seminars, and I'd also be super happy to come back and talk to you guys in more detail about anything that you need or is interesting to you. So I am going to go ahead and share some slides and walk you guys through, just touch on a bunch of different things. And like I said, please feel to interrupt or ask questions as we go. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Let me just... Okay. All right. So this is us chatting about why habits matter and what a big difference good habits can make in your life. Part of the reason I've been able to do everything that I've been able to do, and some things I'll touch on with you guys today, is because I do have really strong foundational habits that I've always been able to fall back on. And it's been really interesting to study the relationship between habits and your happiness. So kind of cool. Finding your why. So a lot of reasons that people struggle professionally is they lose track of why they're doing things in the first place. So when you're an academic, and I don't want to speak for you guys, but I know when I was going through my PhD, it seemed like there was one track, and that was you graduate with your PhD, you get a tenure track job, you get tenure, you move through all the things. And that was like the ideal. It's the narrative that you hear all the time. And so I never questioned what I wanted to do at all. I just assumed that was the right thing to do. And so I did get a tenure track job, and I did get tenure, and I've done all the things. Now I'm working in administration, and it's interesting because I never really knew that I could enjoy doing what I'm doing right now, because I'd been told for so long the proper use for my PhD was just as a faculty member. So number one, make sure you're doing things for the right reason, and you've really thought through why the things that are interesting to you are interesting to you. Your goals need to be yours. So a lot of time in seminar, we talk about our internal motivation versus our external motivations. And one of the things that I try to work with all of my students on is they need to focus on the internal piece more. Because while external forces can be a really great driver and a really strong motivator, they're not always sustainable because they come and go. Whereas the internal piece, the part with you, is always there. So that's the big thing. Know your why. Why do you want what you want? How does it align with your values, and how do those things benefit you? And I'll just give a quick example of what I'm talking about now. I had 2 giant margaritas the size of my face and then decided to go get a PhD. I didn't really care what it was in. I just thought I should get one because it would allow me to have a flexible schedule, because I knew I wanted to be around with the kids. And that was a value of mine. And of course I love research, and of course I love teaching, and of course I love helping people. But my decisions are directly related back to the lifestyle that I want to lead. And sometimes that's really helpful because it allows me to say no to things that, while they seem appealing, don't really fit with what's going to make me happy in life. So focus on the internal. Why do you want what you want? And then this idea of like self-improvement is something that we talk a lot about in seminar. And let's face it, habits are a big part of that. I wish there were an easier, faster, quicker way to get what we want, but really it's small daily changes over long periods of time. So I want to talk to you guys about a few ideas here and some things to think about when you are focusing on your habits. Good habits also need to be sticky. And that means you need to lower the resistance to performing them till it becomes something you do every day. And now I'm going to give you a really boring example that some of you may have heard before, but let's take brushing your teeth, for example. When you were small, your mom probably had, or your dad probably had to force your mouth open and scrub those teeth down, and you fought and fought and fought and didn't like it at all. But now it's an ingrained every single part of your day. You wake up, you brush your teeth. You don't spend a bunch of time debating, do I feel like brushing my teeth today? So what that means is your resistance to performing the behavior is very low because you're not questioning it. On the flip side, if January 1st rolls around and you're saying to yourself like, okay, new year, new me, which by the way, I love, so no judgment here. I love a Monday, I love a fresh start, but the new year, new me problem is, okay, here it is January 1st, and here are all the changes I'm gonna make. I'm gonna work out every single day for the whole entire year, 364 days, 65, Jesus, days, whatever the case might be. And when you set yourself up like that, you probably will fail because you're creating a huge overhaul without any anchor points for habits. And so when we look at sticky habits, those are the ones that we can maintain over time, but it takes time to build them. And in order to build them, you need really great triggers and very low resistance. So let's talk about triggers for just a second, since those are going to come up a few more times. I have to remind myself visually. Visual triggers tend to be the most helpful to me. I have to remind myself visually when I want to do a thing. So I set up visual triggers for myself every day. Examples of that would be when I first started using a planner and tracking data, when I started teaching these seminars, I was trying to do it as an afterthought, like after a couple days, but I needed to be doing it daily. So I would lay it out so I could see it when I woke up and do the thing as soon as I thought about it. So visual triggers. The problem with triggers is that most of us rely on emotional triggers, and those are the ones that we have zero control over. So an example of an emotional trigger might be you're having a really stressful day and you go to the cabinet and eat a whole entire package of Oreos. Your emotions are triggering those behaviors. But if we can create different kinds of triggers for ourselves, like audio triggers, visual triggers, then we can lessen the strength of the emotional triggers, which do tend to drive our decision-making throughout the day. One of the big things that I wish I had time for in an hour, but I'm not going to, is to talk to you guys about tendencies, because I use those in seminars. So there are upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels. There are 4 different tendencies. And the way that you approach habit formation and external accountability is directly related back to how accountability works for you personally. So they're the kind of people that know what the rules are and they just want to follow the rules. Most academics are not that way, though. Most academics are questioners, and they only want to do something if it makes sense. So you have to spend a lot of time making sure that your behaviors make sense if you want them to be sticky and you want it to happen long term. We also need to be focused on the stories that we're telling ourselves when it comes to our habits and our behaviors. An example of this would be, I'm not good at math, and I wish I had a better example for you guys today, but this one is very true for me. I really struggled in algebra, and I started telling myself at that time that I was not good in math, and I made huge academic decisions based on something I felt when I was 13 years old. But we do rely on those narratives. They're grounding points for us. So instead of thinking about the limiting factors pregnant at the time, and I kept getting stuck in my desk. So it was humiliating on a whole bunch of different levels. But I guess my point is that that course changed the narrative for me. It changed the way I thought about math. Does that make sense? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, Leslie, we lost you for just a second, but
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I'm
we lost your
sorry.
audio, but now it's back.
Okay, sorry about that. This happens a lot over Zoom. I apologize to you guys. So anyway, what I was saying is just changing the narrative, and the only way to do that is by changing your behavior. To change the story you're telling yourself, you actually have to do something that's going to change the story. So I'm not good at math means you have to get out there and you have to do stuff. I remember, like, I'm a competitive ultra runner, and when I first started running, I started, once again, all my big decisions after 2 giant margaritas and a whole lot of shame. I had a friend that had signed up for a marathon, and she wanted me to run with her. And guess what? I sucked at running. I sucked at running when I was 23 years old. But I committed, and now, almost 20 years later, it's great. But I had to change what I was telling myself in order to make that change, that I could do the things. Focusing on our resistance, like why we resist certain behaviors. Part of our resistance comes from vulnerability, like we're uncomfortable. I think that there are so many different levels of vulnerability when we talk about resistance, but a big part of the reason that we resist behaviors is because we don't trust ourselves and we're afraid of failure. But this is why habits can really help, because they will support some of the changes that you are trying to make. And when you commit to performing behaviors and then turn around and actually do perform them, the trust in yourself increases, and that means you're willing to take greater risks and try new things. But one of those first pieces is making sure you understand why you're resistant to a behavior and what you can do to change that. So sparking desire for change. Of course, this is a huge component of what we're talking about with habits and happiness and productivity. Like, what do you want long-term? So all of my students in seminar, they take a values exercise, and they'll come up with like between 3 and 10 of their top values. And they're going to have to build a life around those things, because you will be much happier if you're living your values. That's not a complicated, I think it's something we all know, but it's something we forget when we're making very big choices. So every single time I'm either adding something to my plate or taking something off of my plate, I ask, hey, is this getting me where I want to be long-term? So I have a dream about how I want my life to be, and I want my behaviors to reflect that. The other piece with habits is, for them to really be sticky over time, is you need to enjoy doing them. And it can be any type of behavior over time, but if it provides stability and grounding points throughout your day, eventually habits that may be difficult for you to bring on board will be much easier over time. The problem with us just setting goals, which is, by the way, most of us are very goal oriented. So let me just say, if you wake up January 1st and you say, I'm going to lose 10 pounds this year, that's my big goal. Uh-oh, sorry. This always happens too. I know, at least some of you are smiling. I appreciate it. So if you wake up January 1st and you say, this is the year, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. That's great. That's a goal. That's a goal. But how are you actually going to get there? What's the map? And the map is the habit. So once you know what you want, by all means, backtrack and figure out what behaviors are actually going to get you there, because that's the key to success. All right. Visualizing the best version of yourself. I use visualization techniques quite a bit with my students and myself. Like, if I can picture myself being where I want to be, it definitely helps with motivation, which in turn helps with discipline. But as some of you know, discipline and motivation.
We lost audio. We can't hear you.
So for many of us, what that might mean is building habits on top of habits that we already have. So low-hanging fruit. I have a student in one of my seminars who wanted to start meditating every day. It was really important to her. But she also really enjoyed laying in bed every day. So what she did is she combined a behavior that she was already doing, which was laying in bed, with the new behavior that she wanted to adopt, which was meditation. Did I lose you guys for a minute there? Hello? Yes? No?
I think
Yes.
we're good now.
Your
Okay.
volume cut out again.
Jesus, I wonder if that's going to continue this whole time. My kids are not on the internet, so I have no idea what's going on, but we have had outages in our area, so I apologize.
Yeah, we lost you for a second, but it's all good now. Don't worry.
So the small daily changes that you're making, the habits that you're building on, or the behaviors that you're building on habits that already exist, those are what are going to amount to something significant over time. I'm sure you guys have all heard, it doesn't matter what you do once in a while. What matters what you do is every day. Every single day, what are you doing to move yourself forward? The other thing with habits and behaviors is success breeds success. And what that means is to build trust in ourselves, we need to focus on not easy to attain habits, but habits that are accessible for us. And so eventually what you have then is you have a chain of habits that's so strong that it's not ever going to be broken. They're behaviors you engage with every single day. So this is an example I have for that, and it is personal, and I hope I'm not going to offend anyone, but I was diagnosed with a really aggressive form of cancer in 2015. And I was pretty much at the height of my competitive running, and I was living my very best life. You know, I was a vegan, I had gotten tenure, I was just on cloud nine. Like, I was really loving life. And then I got sick. And when I got sick, a lot of things, a lot of behaviors fell away because I didn't have the ability to do everything that I used to be able to do. But I've talked to you guys about how important running is to me. I never missed one day. Not one day when I was going through chemo for a whole entire year. 10 miles minimum, didn't matter how long it took, but I was really committed to maintaining some part of myself. And it's not that I was trying to maintain a level of fitness. It's not like I was trying to win any races at that point. I was just trying to feel like myself. And that sticky habit of running every single day, I do credit with getting me through some really difficult periods in my life, because we are what we do. And I don't mean professionally, but you are a summation of the behaviors that you take part in every single day. Make sense? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, great. So this is a good approach if you guys are wanting to jump into focusing on habit formation and making better choices throughout the day, adding and subtracting. Some people have very addictive personalities, and I am one of those people. If I engage in a behavior that feels good to me, it's very difficult for me to stop. And that's why I have to have really firm boundaries around anything fun, like alcohol, staying out late, whatever the case might be. I need really firm boundaries. The other thing is, if you're trying to quit a habit, you need to have a replacement habit for it. And you need to figure out why it's difficult to stop. So replacement habits. An example that's really cool around replacement habits is they've done some studies on people trying to eat more healthfully when it comes to diets and things of that nature. And if you tell someone these are all the things you cannot eat, they are much less successful. However, if you say these are the things you need to incorporate in your diet, automatically some of the trash is subtracted on its own just because there's no room for it anymore. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, great. So be patient when you're thinking about the adding and subtracting piece, and figure out what's working for you and what's not, and tweak as you go. You are your own very best long-term project. You are your best research. Like, use yourself and figure out what's working, what's not, and why. And the example I have for this add and subtract piece was, so, you know, we're in quarantine, and I have very firm rules around television, just for those of you that don't know me. The only time I watch any shows at all is if I'm on the treadmill. That's the rule. No TV unless I'm on the treadmill. But we're in quarantine, and so some stuff slipped a little, and I started to notice that when I was doing skincare in the afternoons, I was watching HBO, and what used to take 15 minutes started taking 45 minutes. Because I was enjoying myself way too much. And I do not have 45 minutes to waste on my face every day. So I had to pull back and say, okay, this is a habit that I've added that's not serving me. It's hurting my productivity. And what can I replace it with? So instead, what I do is I write for 30 minutes. So it's a nice compromise. It's not the full 45, but it's at least getting me to be more productive. Accountability. So this is the part that's going to be different for so many of you that it would probably be helpful for us to do a whole entire seminar on tendencies and accountability, but I'll try to touch on everything very quickly. So do you remember those 4 tendencies I mentioned at the beginning? Upholders, questioners, obligers, and rebels? Okay, so most people are obligers. And what that means is they need external accountability and monitoring in order to be their most successful. Obligers are the coolest, best, most wonderful partners. They're kick-ass people. The problem is they don't have great boundaries and they tend to put people's needs before their own. So if you're an obliger with a really tight schedule and someone comes in and messes it up, you're more likely to let them do that than any other tendency because you're so service-oriented and you're a people pleaser in the very best way. So that's obligers. Most academics are questioners. And what that means is that accountability only works for them if the accountability system makes sense. So questioners, for example, hate busy work. They're insulted by busy work. They're also really great at talking themselves into and out of behaviors. So that's why the external piece is really important for questioners, because they're such great debaters that, once again, they can talk themselves into or out of anything. I know quite a few rebels, and rebels resist all forms of accountability. They like freedom. So the way that we provide accountability for rebels is by creating the illusion of freedom, which is super cool. And I would love to talk to you guys about that, but probably not today. And then last but not least, upholders. And that's what I am. They are not flexible thinkers, but they know how to get shit done. And sorry, I know we're recording and I just said a bad word. Sorry, Raquel. But they know how to get things done. And they don't really need the external accountability so much, but they do enjoy it for feedback. But most of their stuff is internal, like what they want internally. But when you have an accountability system, it can really help move you forward. There are peer-to-peer accountability relationships, mentor-mentee, which I'm sure you are all very familiar with. But whenever you can share successes with someone, you are most likely to want to repeat those behaviors over time. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. If at first you don't succeed, my habit system, what works for me now, is mainly just a huge mess of 20 years of trial and error. The other thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is when you are focused on habits and trying to figure out what's working and what's not working, you have to understand that there are going to be some habits you want to adopt that are just not fitting in with your lifestyle. And if they're not a true priority for you, they're never going to stick. So I have students who will say things to me like, well, I want to run, or I want to be more fit, or I want this, or I want that. But if it's not truly a value that they have, they can only maintain that behavior short term. This is that example I tried to give you about that January. I'm going to lose 10 pounds this year. That's not a good goal. A good goal would be something along the lines of, I'd like to be healthier this year. And these are the habits that are going to support that. But if it's something terminal, like weight loss, once that 10 pounds has been met, there's no incentive for you to continue really. But if it's health you're after, there's always, long-term incentives to that. Then moral licensing, that's on here. Questioners, I am talking to you. My questioners are the best at loophole spotting. They will find good reasons to or to not do pretty much anything. And moral licensing is when we come up for excuses for behaviors that we either should or should not be doing. So I have students that will say to me, or no, I'll just give you the worst example I have. So I had a student and she was in year 7 of her PhD. And she came to see me to join seminar. And when we had our one-on-one appointment, she's like, I don't understand why I'm having such a hard time writing this dissertation. I'm 7 years in. I was supposed to be done 2 years ago. I don't know what's wrong. And through all the questions that I asked and the stuff that we discussed, I figured out that girl had been taking every single summer off since the beginning. Well, no wonder it was taking 7 years. But her argument to support that behavior was, well, I work hard during the school year, therefore I deserve to take the summer off. And since you all have PhDs, because you're all sitting here, that's not a thing. Like, you have to suck it up for a certain number of years. There's no deserving time off. Like, you have to gut it out. But when you are in the habit of moral licensing behaviors that don't serve you, you become really good at it. Like, okay, well, I ate really healthfully this week, so I'm going to have a Wendy's cheeseburger and I don't even know what else, like all over the weekend. You undo the progress because you're using moral licensing as an excuse. Sometimes if you look at things like it's just one cigarette, it's just a couple extra drinks, it's just whatever the case might be, that is moral licensing at its best. Be very careful with yourself when you give yourself rewards for good behaviors, because you want rewards to be moving you forward. So the example that we talked about this week in seminar, so I apologize for Kel, I know you've heard this, is if you guys reward yourself with something that is going to derail progress, it may feel very good initially, but long-term, it feels awful. And the example that I have around the HBO thing is most true for me. The reason I have really firm boundaries around television is because I have a hard time quitting behaviors I enjoy. I have a very addictive personality. So there is no watching one Netflix show for me. I can't watch one. I'll watch a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and next thing I know, 8 hours have passed, and that's not productive and that's not helping my career. So for a while, I would try to reward myself with things like treats or TV or whatever the case might be, but that was not helpful because it was not pushing me forward. So now I focus on rewards that do feel good. And so for me, that might mean, you know, a little extra climb on the weekend or a hike with the kids or whatever the case might be, but a reward that actually leaves me feeling energized, that fills my cup instead of takes away. And so that's something for all of us to keep in mind when we talk about rewards. So Gretchen Rubin is the one that I use for my 4 tendencies that I've mentioned a few times to you guys, but she also has this new book out called Outer Order, Inner Calm. And I pretty much spent this whole entire last weekend running, thinking about this book. And I spend 12 hours over the weekend running. So lots of deep thoughts for me. Gretchen Rubin's book is about how your physical space affects your workflow, that when things are organized and beautiful and, you know, not cluttered and clean, you're more productive because you're not visually distracted by what's going on around you. And I am very, by the way, prone to visual distractions. If things don't look good in the house, I can't really work, you know. And by the way, all of us have some level of this when we're trying to put off tasks. And what I've told Raquel's group before is if you have writing to do, you got to write, and you also need to clean the toilets, you're going to clean the toilets because it's a less vulnerable activity than writing. So the cleaner our surroundings are and the better that we can protect ourselves from, you know, distractions, visual distractions, that will help us to be more productive. But the other piece that I was thinking about this weekend on Outer Order, Inner Calm is sometimes our emotional experiences that are external to ourselves create a huge loss in productivity. And I think if we just look at the last, you know, since March, everything that's gone on in the world, right? I don't think anyone has been perfectly productive because there are things that are occurring that are probably weighing fairly heavily on many of us. So external, just being aware of those external emotional cluttering factors and how they relate to productivity is important as well. Not to solve it, but to just be aware of it, that it does affect you. Okay, one habit at a time. So if you're committed to changing behaviors, what you want to do is look throughout your day on for a habit that you will do no matter what. Okay? So whether it's brushing your teeth or for me, running, what you can do is you can build on top of that habit or underneath that habit. And what that looks like is if brushing your teeth is something that happens every single day and you also want to do 10 push-ups a day, you would do your 10 push-ups right after brushing your teeth because that's a habit that's already strong, that already exists. And then eventually what you do as you build underneath and on top of existing habits is you create systems. And those systems can really help you be productive throughout the day. There are drawbacks to really strong systems. I have mentioned to you guys, I'm an upholder and I'm not a flexible thinker, and that's very true. My habits, if something is disrupted and things aren't going to plan, it's difficult for me to rebound during the day. But generally speaking, habits are what help me get everything that I want to get done. I've mentioned to many of you that when I first started, when I was trying to heal from chemo and multiple surgeries and all that good stuff, my oncologist told me that I need to think about cross-training because I couldn't just run my way back to where I was. And so I bought a Peloton, and I hated that thing. It is so hard. Spin is so hard. If there are any bike riders out there, Jesus, people, you are badasses, because I was on the struggle bus and I thought I was fit. Case in point, though, I had to add the Peloton on top of the running that already existed. Okay, you're not invited. One habit at a time, yes. Oh my God. And then avoid adding new behaviors until you're really secure in the habits that you've already formed. And this can take anywhere from 3 months to a year, depending on just how much traction you have for something to truly become habitual. And for it to truly become habitual, that means your resistance is 0 to performing the habit. That's when it's truly a habit. Does that make sense? So we call them behaviors before they're habitual, but once you don't fight it anymore and it's an ingrained part of your life, then it's a habit. So if that's helpful to you guys when you think about scaffolding, like on top of and underneath, finding something like that is key. Understanding change. So I am the least patient person I know. It's not anything I'm proud of. It's something I work on constantly, and I fail every single day, every day. But what I've learned, unfortunately, through being as sick as I was and having to rebuild myself, is that there was no way for me to rush it. And that I was rebuilding from something pretty bad, and it was just going to take time. And I had therapists telling me it's going to take years, it's going to take years, it's going to take years. Oncologists saying it's going to take 5 years for your body to regenerate. It's going to take a long time. And it was really hard for me because I'm not good at waiting. But for us to truly make long-lasting change, we have to accept that it's just going to take us time. Going slow to succeed. In the previous slide, when I was mentioning adding one habit at a time, that's what I mean, going slow to succeed. And also starting with low-hanging fruit. You know, for example, if meditation is your jam and you want to start meditating, maybe don't start with 20 minutes twice a day. Maybe start with 3 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever the case might be. But building up a tolerance to a new behavior is just as important as incorporating and lowering resistance to the new behavior. Measuring success. This is the part I love most because I love data so much, but I like to know when I'm having a good day and I'm very productive, what made it that way? What made me successful that day? And when I'm having a trash day where I haven't managed to get anything done, I want to know why. Because I can't change it. I can't create any lasting change in myself unless I understand why these things are happening. And I know it sounds extremely indulgent to spend that much time working on that introspective piece, but I do believe it's critical. I think we all need a significant amount of alone time to be able to process what's happening, you know, who we are, who we want to be, and figuring out when we're successful, what's working, and when we're struggling, why we're struggling. Because you can actually do something about it if you know why. Sharing accomplishments is a huge piece of what we do in seminar. I feel like in academia, and you guys can tell me I'm totally wrong because I'm just speaking from my own experiences mainly, but you're supposed to reach certain milestones. And it's like, okay, so you go ahead and you defend your dissertation and they say, congratulations, doctor. And then maybe we take a few days to be like, oh my God. And then it's like, oh, well, now I have to do my edits. Now I have to do revisions. Now I have to publish my dissertation. Now I have to move on to article. Now I have to find a job. In academia, what I have noticed is that there is no way to truly, or I have not had luck, truly celebrating my milestones because there's so much pressure to just keep going. So in seminar, what we try to do is spend a lot of time sharing our accomplishments with other people because trust me, it makes a huge difference when you know that other people struggle the way you struggle and other people are succeeding the way you're succeeding. And the other thing is when you see one academic in your group succeed, that's success for all of us. Like it means something for all of us. And it's really important to share those things. Finding an accountability partner. If you're the kind of person who's going to benefit from external accountability, you need to leverage that because that is why my obligers are the easiest ones to work with. Because the biggest piece is they just need external accountability. They just need someone else to know what it is that they're working on. All right, so now that my dog's interrupting with her big face, I apologize. Her name is Ruby, by the way. She's normally very sweet, but right now I don't know what's going on. All right, so I would love to take questions as she slowly moves. Come on. Or if you guys have any concerns or thoughts or feelings, whatever the case might be.
I would like to ask something about the last thing you mentioned, that is celebrate your accomplishments.
Yes.
That feels so real to me. I never had the time to celebrate. I always had to constantly run and keep up with what I was trying to do. How do you force yourself to do that?
Okay, right now I can tell you what I do, and who knows if it's going to be effective for everybody, but I celebrate with my kids. And I know it's not the same, but we're in quarantine. So let me start by saying, I know we're in quarantine, and so like celebrations with lots of friends is not going to happen unless you do it over Zoom. And I don't know about you guys, but I'd be happy if I never had to use Zoom ever again in my whole entire life after the next last 6 months. I don't know. Is it just me, or are you guys frustrated with Zoom? Yeah, okay, I know. But you know, you miss that face-to-face interaction, and we think we can make it up over Zoom, but you can't. So with celebration, I say find the people that you can celebrate with and do the thing. Like I get champagne and I get, you know, sparkling apple cider for the boys. And, you know, I say, hey, mom just published an article. Let's, you know, let's like grill and let's do a thing. And, you know, we have a dance party. And I know all this sounds really trite and stupid. And guys, trust me, there is nothing I want to do less sometimes than get dressed up and do a dance party. But I feel so much better when I'm doing it. And I can share how hard I've worked with the people I love the most, because they are the reason I'm doing it. So if I can't celebrate with them, you know, what's the point? Oh, here, you want me to stop the share? That would probably be good. Then you'll get a close-up of my dog. Oh, God. All right, here we go. Okay, does that help at all?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it has to be really mindful and thoughtful, and you have to make time for it. And trust me, I know how hard that is. I defended my dissertation, and first of all, guys, never wear white to a job interview or dissertation defense, because I was sweating so bad it was a wet t-shirt contest in front of a whole entire male community of brilliant people. And when they came out at the end and they said, congratulations, doctor, I shook their hands, and I went home to an 8-month-old baby. And that was the only time I'd had a babysitter, and it was only for 2 hours, you know, whatever the hours were, a couple hours while I was doing my defense. And I took Roman, and that was it. There was no celebrating anything. I got tenure. No celebrating anything, because I had a publication coming out the next week. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like that constant, and you don't ever take time to appreciate just how much you've done and how far you've come. Because look at you all. You've clearly come very far. All right. Sorry, that was a bit of a mom talk.
I think we have a question in the chat.
Yes. I'll pull it up here. Hold on. Okay. Oh, let's see. From the point of view of that cultural change that you point out, have you experienced it in your professional life? Okay. As far as how I have seen the need for like change in my professional experiences and what it took to get there, I just want to clarify and make sure I understand. In my professional life, is that the way you guys are reading it, or did I just don't want to misunderstand if I'm going to try and answer.
I think that's how I understand it. Roberto can give us some more detail.
Okay. I'll start, and then Roberto, if I'm not getting it right, please, for the love of the holy baby, interrupt me and redirect. Culture of change. I think in academia, we have a huge problem with change. And there is no way that I'm going to say, oh, yay, COVID, because this is a giant shitstorm and we all know it. But moving remotely, forced academia, to change the way it was approaching many of the ways that we deliver material to large groups of students. And I am not saying Zoom is perfect, but there are things that we had been waiting on, because in academia, and this is true like the ivory tower in general, we are so entrenched in history and we are so committed to tradition that we fail to see that things are changing and we need to change too. So one of the things that I've noticed professionally is, while I'm much more comfortable face-to-face with my students, there is a way to deliver, there are benefits to delivering content such as this. For example, if you guys have time constraints, if you live far away, you can join. There are so many nice things surrounding that, but we are resistant to change because it's not really supported, I don't feel, in academia in general. I think resiliency and change need to be explored a little bit more, because I think that part of the reason that we're so entrenched in tradition in university settings is because it's what has worked historically, and we don't want to rock the boat, and so we just keep pushing on. But at the same time, I do not think that's the solution, because our students are changing. These pushes for diversity and inclusion, traditional systems do not support them. I was actually giving a really big talk on diversity and inclusion when we got the notice that we were not going to be on campus after March 12th. And it was interesting timing, because we were actually in the process of discussing ways to reach more students in non-traditional ways, because guess what? This is not set up so that everyone has equal access to education. That's not true. We're all incredibly privileged to be sitting here. And if we don't learn how to truly level the playing field, when we talk about change and diversity and inclusion at this level, it's just a bunch of trash. Because if you're not actually willing to make the changes, then we're still greatly marginalizing most of the people who could take part in this. Let's see. Always positive. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Around change in your personal, or professional fields, I think writing, my writing habit was a big changer for me, being really committed to that every day. Because it is true, you have to repeat it for it to truly be transformative. And now I even write on the weekends, but I'll just write a sentence. But my resistance to it is so low that it has become something that I now do every day. But yeah, that is the habit piece. You have to commit to it to truly see lasting change. Other questions?
I have a question. No, we've been talking all about the habits, and I know for some people, for me, it was before, starting going to your seminars, it was very hard to start small or start slow and say, how do I build a habit, and how is this going to help me for my daily basis, for my actual work, right? So if you can give us some hints of how to start, and if it's important to just do one thing every day, even if it's very small, or how to overcome this sadness or frustration when we can't do it, or when we fail to do it.
Yeah. Well, let me start with the hardest part, which is what you just said, which is the sadness and frustration when we don't perform behaviors that we've said we're going to commit to. When that happens, I try to take a really critical look at the internal and external factors that were in play. Because if I'm not doing it because I don't feel like it, but I'm using moral licensing and making it a something else type of issue, that's on me. But you know what? External stuff happens that derails the day. And I had a student in our climb seminar say to me, how can you run 4 hours a day, work a full-time job, be a parent, keep a really clean house, blah, 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 blah. How do you do all that? Well, because I don't do anything else. That's how I do that. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. So as far as the lasting change piece is concerned, and how to talk yourself how to talk yourself out of disappointment when you haven't met a goal or you've lost a habit. I think in those cases, you need to take a look at, like, was it a choice or was an external factor driving it? So for example, if you're supposed to write 8 hours and your house catches on fire and you don't write that day, there is no reason you should ever feel sorry about that. That is an external factor that dictated your productivity that you had no control over. However, if it's a beautiful day and you decide to take the day to hike and do whatever, or like a ski day, I have students that do that and then don't write. Like, I'm not mad at you. It doesn't bother me, but if you're feeling let down, you need to re-examine, remember that reward, like what's making you feel good, what's not making you feel good, if it was worth it. And if it was worth it, then great. But if it wasn't worth it, then you need to be mindful of not repeating those behaviors because you're torpedoing yourself. Now, the other piece about like small daily changes, I do believe that's key to long-term success. It's the little things that make the biggest difference. For example, committing to a really good sleep routine and waking up at the same time every day. This seems like the most giant duh in the whole world, but I have so many students with erratic sleep patterns, and then they wonder, like, why am I not productive during the week? Well, they're not going to bed at the same time. Some days they're waking up at noon, some days they're waking up at 8 a.m. That's not sustainable for anyone. But yet we do it to ourselves when we feel like we have flexibility, but that flexibility is actually hindering your productivity and lessening your happiness, because what it's doing is causing enough disruption in the routine that the reasons that we have habits and we have the structure is to lessen the stress surrounding making decisions every day. So instead of arguing with yourself about whether or not you're going to write today, it's on the schedule. It's your commitment. Whether or not you're going to walk your dog, well, your dog needs to be walked. There is no internal debate that needs to happen here. And that's what habits, even the small ones that we work on, build over time, so that you don't waste your emotional energy talking yourself into behaviors or out of behaviors. Just do it. And I know you've heard this a million times, Raquel, but you just have to sometimes do it. And if you do it for long enough, then the problem is solved. We only have so much gas in the tank. And I'm just going to touch on this emotional energy budget thing for you guys, and I'll shut up and let you ask another question. But in times of stress, when you wake up, you have lower energy and less energy budget to handle or to manage than you do on days where everything's going really well. So if you think about like a really trying time in your life. So for example, when I went through chemo for a year, I only had so much to give every day, and I gave it to running. I'm not saying it was smart, but that's where I spent the energy. However, when things are great and I'm feeling good, I can do my running and I do work and I do parenting and I do other things. And if any of you have ever struggled with depression, or if you've had a parent die, death in the family, whatever the case might be, anything stressful, just look at the last couple of weeks. Anything external is going to pull down that energy budget. And so you want to make sure those habits are in place so that you're not using the energy budget to debate with yourself whether or not you're going to engage in helpful behaviors. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? No? Everyone's good? All right. Well, then
maybe you can give us some resources that you can read, because you were talking about the different personalities, or like some books that people find helpful.
Yes. So there is a book that I use in seminar called The 4 Tendencies. That's kind of been the cornerstone, by the way, of everything I've built at CU. Like, that's what I started with, trying to figure out why what worked for me doesn't work for everyone. You know, I was teaching these productivity seminars and I was like, why are they having such a hard time? Well, it's because everyone's different. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin is awesome. I also use the Enneagram with all of my students, not because I'm trying to be some crazy Enneagram freak, but because the Enneagram addresses what's motivating to you. And if you can figure that out, if you can figure out what's going to motivate you, and the accountability piece, which is what's going to help you get things done, ta-da, everything is so much easier. but you need to know those things about yourself. So you guys know I'm an upholder, which is probably the most annoying of all the tendency types. And you all know this because now you've heard me talk for an hour. But the other piece to that is I'm a type 3 on the Enneagram, which is the achiever. So if you guys can figure out your Enneagram type and then your tendency, if you want to sit down with me and we can talk about a personalized plan, that's the most beneficial. And to figure out why you're drawn to the things that you're drawn to and why some things are easy for you and some things are so difficult. When you know why, then we can address it. And that's what those books help us do. And the other thing I would mention is that, you know, I do run 4 seminars a week. And I know they say they're for grad students, but as some of you know, I take everyone. I have students that graduated years ago that still come. So you would all be welcome. And you can just sign up online. It's a self-register through Canvas. And if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. I'm also happy, you know, if you have questions, if you want to email me, it's just leslie.blood@colorado.edu. And I think the problem is, like, we covered so much, like so many different elements of habits today, that we could have done a really deep dive into multiple areas, but, you know, of course we didn't have time. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know, because I'd be happy to come and talk to you guys just about the tendency piece, because when I understood that, it changed my life. So I'm an upholder, but my children are, one's a questioner and one's a rebel. And I don't parent them the same way because their tendencies are different and they respond differently to different things. My colleagues, the way I interact with people at work, the way I help my students like Raquel to come up with individualized plans, your tendency matters. That's going to dictate what kind of accountability system we create for you, what's going to be most beneficial. So that can be really helpful too.
Thanks so much, Leslie. I think if there are no other questions, we can close this session. I just want to say, for the records, I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, I just realized. So I'm Valeria. I've been the organizer of this monthly series of workshops together with PAC, Boulder, an incredible association. They do lots of events during the year. Now that we all have moved remotely, it's a bit easier to host webinars than all other sorts of events that they were already hosting. So again, I want to refer everybody to our website, which is colorado.edu/PAC, PAC. And we also have a dedicated webpage for the tutorials. If anyone wants to suggest any either contribution, people can also give workshops, they can volunteer to give workshops. And I want to emphasize that all of this is volunteering work, by the way, that we're all doing. And thanks, Leslie, so much. And people can get in touch with us. They can give us feedback. We always appreciate feedback. If there are no further questions, I think there is one in the, okay, there's a thank you in the chat. Thank you,
Yes,
Roberto, for joining
you're so
us.
welcome.
Yes, absolutely. We really appreciate you connecting from Chile. That sounds so exciting. Okay, so I guess if there are no other comments or questions, thanks, Leslie. You've been great, as always. Very energetic and very inspiring. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we can close the video and just say bye for now if there are no other comments.
Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm really grateful to all of you. These are always awkward and weird, but this was super fun. And if you ever want me to come back and talk about tendencies, I'd be really happy to do it. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.